Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something pretty heavy, but absolutely crucial: the trauma and abuse identification exercise. Look, processing difficult past experiences can feel like trying to untangle a massive knot. The sheer weight of the emotion is just overwhelming. And that's exactly why we're using this specific exercise today. It gives us a highly structured framework to look at those painful experiences with real clarity and, honestly, a bit of objectivity. Because by putting clear, concrete labels on what actually happened, we take that vital first step toward understanding.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to define trauma, distinguish between invasive acts and neglect, map out the 6 domains of abuse, highlight emotional neglect, and then finally, walk step by step through the identification exercise.
All right, Section 1, defining trauma and its types. We've got to establish a shared vocabulary of pain here, because healing truly begins with clarity. We literally can't identify what we can't name.
The absolute most crucial point to grasp here is that trauma is, fundamentally, an emotional response to a terrible event. We're talking things like accidents or natural disasters. Now, right after something like that happens, shock and denial are totally typical. But it's those longer-term reactions that sneak up on you: unpredictable emotions, sudden flashbacks, strained relationships, or even physical stuff like random headaches or nausea. And while all those feelings are completely normal, having a solid framework really helps when you're just stuck and having a hard time moving forward. So trauma generally falls into 3 main buckets. First up, we have acute trauma, also called type 1. This is your single, sudden, out-of-the-blue incident. Second is chronic trauma. Think of this as repeated and prolonged, like ongoing domestic violence. And third is complex trauma, or type 2. This one involves exposure to varied, multiple traumatic events. Psychologists sometimes call this polyvictimization, which really just means experiencing several different types of trauma over time. But what makes complex trauma so uniquely devastating is that it almost always involves a deep betrayal of trust in primary relationships. It's usually carried out by someone the victim actually knows and trusts. Moving right along to Section 2, invasive acts versus neglect. Let's look at the 2 primary modes of how trauma is actually inflicted, because this really builds the core concept of the exercise. As we go through this, every single experience we analyze is going to be filtered through one essential overarching matrix. We have to ask, was the act invasive or was it neglect? Let's clarify that a bit. Invasive refers to acts of commission. Basically, it's any direct act that results in harm, the risk of harm, or even just the threat of harm. Neglect, on the flip side, is about acts of omission. This means any confirmed or even suspected egregious failure to provide basic, age-appropriate needs. And this is a huge aha moment for a lot of folks. Many people don't realize that simply withholding physical, educational, medical, or psychological needs absolutely counts as a profound form of abuse. It's not always about what was done. Sometimes it's about what wasn't done. Okay, Section 3, the 6 domains of abuse. Now that we have those 2 modes in mind, we can map out exactly where this trauma actually occurs. The framework categorizes our life experiences into 6 very distinct domains: physical, emotional or psychological, mental, spiritual, sexual, and social. Essentially, every single instance of trauma you identify is going to fall into one of these 6 buckets. These domains set some really clear boundaries. Physical, as you'd guess, involves bodily injury. Mental abuse is all about undermining your self-esteem and manipulating your reality. Spiritual abuse, that includes punishing someone for having different religious beliefs or cruelly ridiculing their deep opinions. Sexual encompasses any form of sexual violence or exploitation. And then there's social abuse, which is just this incredibly insidious, destructive form of isolation. It's designed to cut a victim off from their social network, their friends, or their family. It can even look like public humiliation or spreading malicious rumors, just to manipulate how others see them. That brings us to Section 4, unpacking emotional neglect. We really need to give some special focus to the emotional domain here, because psychological abuse covers behaviors that are incredibly damaging, even when there is absolutely 0 physical contact involved. I want you to consider this staggering reality for a second. Emotional abuse is actually a stronger predictor than physical abuse when it comes to the likelihood of suicide attempts later in life. Let that sink in. Emotional abuse isn't just calling someone a mean name. We're talking about destroying a valued possession just to cause pain, deploying emotional blackmail, weaponizing the silent treatment, or even actively punishing someone for receiving an award. It's silent, but its impact is severe and incredibly long-lasting.
Now, within emotional neglect itself, there's a critical difference between active and passive forms. Active emotional neglect actively punishes your feelings. Say, for example, parents sending a kid to their room just for crying or demeaning them for showing frustration. That teaches a person to be deeply ashamed of their basic biological expressions. Passive emotional neglect, however, well, that subliminally tells you your emotions are completely irrelevant. This happens when caretakers just fail to notice when you're sad, fail to listen when you talk, or don't bother to ask what you prefer. It sends this utterly devastating message that your voice and your thoughts simply do not matter. And finally, Section 5, the 5-step identification exercise. So, now that you've got the complete vocabulary and you understand that matrix of invasive acts versus neglect across all 6 domains, let's explore how to actually apply this framework to your own life and reclaim your story. When you sit down to do this exercise, please give yourself some grace and just take it one step at a time. Step 1. Check the items that you believe apply to you across those 6 domains we just discussed. Take your time scanning through the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, sexual, and social categories. Step 2 is tough, but brave. Give examples. Write down your specific, painful story right next to the items you checked. Acknowledging exactly what happened is incredibly difficult, but it's vital. Step 3, identify the primary type and means. Was the root of this emotional or social? And was it a direct, invasive act of commission, or was it a profound neglect of your basic needs? Step 4, determine the rate. Label whether this was an acute, single incident, or a chronic, repeated pattern compounding over time. And then finally, Step 5, explore the impact. Really ask yourself how this specific event has altered your belief systems, your self-worth, your coping mechanisms, and your overall well-being today. This is how we bring the past into the present so the real work of healing can begin. Identifying the root of the pain using clear, objective terms, that is the very first step toward reclaiming your life. By pulling these experiences out of the shadows and placing them onto a structured matrix, you strip away their chaotic power. So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. Now that you have the framework, are you ready to finally name your story? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep learning.